Jinhsi here is said to be the strongest DPS in all of Wuthering Waves. In fact, she's so strong there are people who would argue that Jinhsi is power creeping even the likes of Jiyan. To me, that sounds ridiculous, hence why I made this video. Welcome to the first episode of Character Versus. And today we have Jinhsi versus Jiyan, where we'll be pitching two of their teams in order to find out and compare what's different about each of them. At the end of each showcase, I'll pull up like datas and graphs for us to extrapolate a conclusion of whether or not Jinhsi is actually that strong that Jiyan gets swept. TLDR? No. But if you're still here, cutie patootie, why did I say that? Allow me to show you the stats. Here we have Jinhsi and Jiyan as well. The main thing I would like to do is control this entire environment as best as I can. So for their stats, I kept them very similar to each other. It is impossible to just replicate the same stats. As for the weapon, they have their own at level 70. As for the echo as well, they have the 5 set of their own element. I've kept their skill enhancement very similar to each other as well. And of course, they're at chain 0, so this applies to most of you. And with that said, allow me to introduce to you the teams. In today's comparison, we have this for Jinhsi's team. We got Mortefi and Verina. This team will be pitched against Jiyan's team, which is also Mortefi and Verina. Now, if you're astute, you realize that Mortefi actually helps out Jiyan a lot more than he helps out Jinhsi. The most obvious reason is that Mortefi's outro skill gives you 38% heavy attack damage amplification, which only helps Jiyan. Jinhsi pretty much does not have heavy attack. However, I've done this in order to balance out the buff that we have in Hazard Tower, which gives Jinhsi a lot of buff. 60% skill damage increase and 60% all damage increase as well, which is insane for Jinhsi. Hence why instead of me just putting Yinlin in for her to have the best team, I decided to just use Mortefi, which is one of the good supports for her, but not the best. She got enough help after all, right? Hopefully this will minimize the disparity between the two teams, which leads me to my next point. I don't think it's possible for me to have a fully balanced setup. I can only try my best to minimize the difference, which is why disclaimer, this video is not to be taken as mathematical proof of who does more damage. Rather, it's a video that compares both of them and how their team plays. And secondly, everything you see in this video is susceptible to human error. I try to minimize it, but I ain't a saint. But enough yapping, just watch the video. I think the results will be helpful anyway. To start with the Jinhsi team, which will be leading with Mortefi and Verina as well, which both of them will do just one thing: racking out Concerto, ulting if possible, and all in all triggering the outro skill and their buffs for Jinhsi to do. This will be the same for Jiyan as well, but what is different is that Jinhsi has an effect on her Forte circuit that will allow her to not spend Concerto energy and still trigger intro skills from her ally. This will happen after every time she does her hardest hitting Dragon Laser Nuke, which is on her E, and you'll be able to see that in this fight I'm using that a lot in order to swap Mortefi in with his intro skill. This will overall aid Mortefi in regenerating Concerto energy, which is something that lowers the amount of time needed to prepare for the entire nuke, since Mortefi would have his Concerto energy max way quicker. And as usual, I don't think my playstyle is 1000% efficient, but what I have on screen right now is the fastest that I can possibly play this. And note that as well, this will not be a 3-star clear considering my Mortefi is level 50, but we just want to extract the general performance of the team in order to compare it to the other team later. Now, what you'll notice with this team as well is that it is very easy to use. You don't need any animation canceling. There's nothing like that really needed. It's a pretty robust approach to play Wuthering Waves, where you just spam most things that you have, max out Concerto energy, swap out all your supports for your DPS to be fully buffed, and just nuke your entire DPS's main kit out, which for Jinhsi is pretty straightforward, which is 4 basic into an E. As long as she gets into the floating state, get her Dragon Laser Beam out, and ult when possible. It is very simple, and by repeating the same tech for a while, you'll find that Jinhsi has no issue clearing this boss at all. In the end, it took me 154 seconds to clear this. I'll draw an actual graph with more interesting facts as well later after we watch Jiyan's attempt. And here we go. In the same team with the pretty much same setup, we have Mortefi, Verina, and Jiyan, and this is similar as well. You want Mortefi and Verina to all get their Concerto up for Jiyan to just nuke as much as he possibly could. Now, the main difference between this team and the last is that you don't have Jinhsi's ability to trigger the intro skill of your next ally after she uses her laser beam nuke on her E, so Mortefi will take a bit longer time to get his Concerto going in some cases. And another glaring difference would be that Jiyan himself has a buff state ultimate, unlike Jinhsi that has just a nuke state ultimate. It's just one instance of attack, yeah? Jiyan's damage will come consistently throughout the span of 10 seconds, which is the duration of his ultimate. However, though, he also has a mini nuke at the start of his ultimate, which actually hurts a bunch. It's nothing compared to Jinhsi, but for the next 10 seconds, Jiyan has a lot of damage output. And for the most part, this team works pretty dang similarly. The final bit of difference that I would say exists would be that Jiyan has 100% parry time, where Jinhsi is pretty good at parrying as well, but not as good as Jiyan. Jiyan can pretty much get 100% of the parries. So against a boss like Mephis that has a lot of parryable attacks, he does wonders and is able to shred the vibration strength very easily. But as you see on screen, I'm doing the same rotation with more Tefi, getting the concerto up to Verina, doing the same thing, getting the concerto up, alt when possible, use a normal combo, back to Jiyan as well, start with his echo actually, right, to get the buffs and everything, and chain that into his ultimate. You also realize that after fully using his ultimate, I actually stay with Jiyan for a little bit. This is because of his energy. A lot of the times with Mephis, you might miss a couple of hits during Jiyan's ulti, which might not end up being enough energy for your next DPS window, which is why I sometimes stay with him so that I guarantee the next time I use Jiyan in the next window, after using the monkey echo, I'll have enough for the ultimate. And by consistently repeating the process, we're able to beat this entire stage with a 1-star clear as well, exactly the same as the Jinhsi team. The actual time taken for this team ended up being 196 seconds as compared to the 154 for Jinhsi, which, you know what, for a tower that's designed for Jinhsi to shine, Jiyan did pretty well, right? But regardless, let's actually delve deeper into what we've just seen. Here we have a graphic that shows what data that I was able to collect. Against level 110 plus Mephis, where Jinhsi versus Jiyan, time taken wise is 154 for Jinhsi, Jiyan has 196, which clearly Jinhsi wins here, but then again, it's not fully balanced at all. And as for the highest damage window, we have Jinhsi coming in at 294k, while Jiyan has 314k. This is measured frame by frame during their DPS window, where they swap in with full buffs, and I recorded every number until they get swapped out again. So you can see that their damage output is actually quite similar, but the glaring difference is the time needed to pull this off. Jinhsi is known to be a quick swap character with an instance of ult damage and an instance of really high nuke damage, which is why during her highest damage window, it only took 9 seconds for her to do. In the case of Jiyan, he has a buff state ultimate, which means he'll take longer to even do all of his damage. And on the screen right now, you see a damage over time comparison of Jinhsi and Jiyan. The yellow line's Jinhsi, the green line's Jiyan. You can actually see that the graph isn't really changing that much. If anything, the only big difference is that at the start, Jiyan has a slower time in order to get himself ready, while Jinhsi will always consistently be at the same level, considering the way you use her is that fast. You swap to someone else, get all of their stuff out, and instantly swap back to Jinhsi. She'll have everything maxed if you have enough coordinated attacks. Not to mention, Jinhsi's Forte Circuit allows her next ally to trigger their intro skill without even needing max concerto. That just means more times to attack for especially more Tefi, which is how I used him in that team. That just allows your entire team to be swapped so much more consistently, so you keep the buff coming as well. Combine that with the amount of coordinated attacks that Mortefi gives, Jinhsi is able to do consistently very high damage. As for Jiyan though, his damage output is not that far behind Jinhsi, even during the week where Jinhsi is really good. The big difference is at the start, which I already mentioned, is because it's slower to set everything up with a team with Jiyan. You have to stay on field a bit longer with each character as compared to a team with Jinhsi. That in the end means Jiyan took a tad bit longer time, considering it's not Jiyan's best tower buff. This is very good. But what can we extrapolate from this though? Does this mean Jiyan's just worse than Jinhsi? Well, no. See, the thing is with Jiyan is that he has a whole mechanic where he can gather mobs. This for me is the main reason why Jiyan isn't even close to being say powercraft. And to depict that, here are the showcases. Here we have Jiyan against a bunch of mobs, with Jinhsi against a bunch of mobs as well. I played the same team the same way, and the result that came in is that Jinhsi took 81 seconds to Jiyan's 56 seconds to clear a stage with a lot of mobs that you can gather. The simple cost to this is that while Jiyan can gather enemies, number one, and Jinhsi doesn't just target the whole field. Especially with her array of skills, you sometimes zoom around with her E, dashing around as well. It is not easy to make sure you always hit every enemy on the field, especially when they're a bit scattered apart. So against any situation where there are mobs that you want to gather and kill quickly, Jiyan will always outperform Jinhsi. However, from the showcase we had earlier, Jinhsi certainly is better than Jiyan in terms of just busting a boss down, considering her high instances of burst damage. But in the end, the difference are really not that big. Jiyan is holding his own very well in a week that's not designed for him, which is why I think we've done enough to draw a bit of a conclusion here. For you Jiyan mains, don't worry, Jiyan is still very strong against mobs, against a singular boss as well. They can still beat the game very easily. As for Jinhsi owners, congrats. I do think Jinhsi has the highest ceiling for fast clear in this version. She racks up more considerable for her entire team with a whole intro skill activation for her ally. Her damage is in the form of a burst. You don't have to stand on field for like 10 seconds, like say with calcharo Jiyan, which just saves you a lot of time, yeah? But over time, you realize that the damage output that they've designed for these two characters are not that crazy that I would just straight up say Jiyan is completely swept by Jinhsi. Not to mention, in certain cases, Jiyan would sweep Jinhsi back, especially against a bunch of mobs, right? And that would be my conclusion. They're both better than the other under certain circumstances. And that will be all for my Yat Fest today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Comment down below anything else you want me to see as well. And yeah, as a final note though, I am a human being, so if there are any mistakes at all, feel free to let me know. But I hope you keep it civil, yeah? And that is all. Take care.